Our deliverables include things like we're doing today, such as the webinars and teleconferences, talking about what we're already doing, and we're also able to address items that you might find of interest. So please do let us know items that you need to have technical assistance webinars presented upon. We're also going to be providing other online media such as videos and transcripts of what we're doing. We will be providing you invitations to regional discipline-specific events, and we are beginning the process to document some of our best practices and put them online for your viewing. We're also hosting convenings, and we'll be talking about one of those at the end of this presentation. For today, I'm over there on the right, and I am the PI and Executive Director for one of the centers, the lead center for our project. That is the National Convergence Technology Center that's based in Frisco, Texas. We focus on IT. Our main presenter today was supposed to have been Kevin Cooper, who is the Director and Dean for RCNet, which is the Regional Center for Nuclear Education and Training at Indian River State College. Kevin holds 25 patents and 40 publications in advanced technology fields. And this presentation that he worked together with Jamie Capers to produce outlines a number of best practices that they use in their center to increase industrial involvement. And all told, their center has worked with 90 industry partners where they've placed over 2,000 graduates and documented and tracked those graduates over the past 4 years. Turns out that Kevin is actually in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, hosting a team in the National Science Foundation Innovation Challenge. He had thought that he would be able to break away from that group today, but unfortunately he is not going to be able to. However, he works integrally with Jamie Capers, who is the program manager for RCNet, and Jamie is very able to handle Kevin's role today, so we're delighted to have him with us. Jamie previously worked in industry as general manager and operations manager in the hospitality and services industry, so he has a background in hiring, training, and retaining employees, so he does have the business knowledge to understand what we're doing in working with business. Then we actually have a business representative from Florida Power and Light's Nuclear Division. James Auld serves as Director of External Training Initiatives, and his primary duties include external workforce development initiatives, and he works closely with the colleges and universities to ensure that he has a pipeline that is robust of well-educated and highly skilled professionals. He collaborates with the colleges to ensure that the curriculum complies with the requirements of the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, which serves the nuclear industry's training accreditation body. So we're delighted to have some very, very qualified people with us today to help us in this presentation. And I would encourage all of you, it does not matter if you are in the nuclear industry or not. What they're going to be focusing on today are principles that would apply to all of us. So stand by, and we're going to begin our presentation in just a moment. But first, let's do a poll so that we can identify the affiliation of the various people that are on our call. So would you please pick, are you involved with an NSF grant or a TACT grant, both, or neither? We'll give just a few minutes. Not minutes, a few seconds, probably less than a minute for you to choose your affiliation. And I'll ask the organizer of the poll to close the poll at the appropriate time and let me know when that is done. So the poll results have been shown to you, and that's very interesting. We have a number of attendees from different areas. So at this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Jamie Capers. Jamie, take it away.
Thank you, Ann. I wanted to thank you guys for inviting us to be a participant of this, and Kevin again sends his apologies. I think some days he would have liked to have been able to break away, but they're enjoying themselves with the students and everything. And Jim and I are here together, so it'll be a great chance for us to go back and forth on it. To start out here, again, we're Regional Center for Nuclear Education and Training. The past 4 years, we have focused on the power generation side of nuclear, but from that expertise and kind of the mission of this webinar today is about engagement. And what we're finding is the engagement in the nuclear aspects is just more than energy. So our expansion process would be into the environmental management, manufacturing, and then the life and plant sciences, as well as maintaining that contacts and presence that we have in the power generation side. So we've used the engagement that we've learned and our subject matter experts that we've become in the nuclear side to help expand and our outreach some in order to increase the breadth and knowledge of our students, because again, we're here to get students jobs. Next slide, Ann, please. Just quick outline of my little presentation here. It's going to, again, background of RCNet, some industry success, the truth of what the industry wants, approaches to that industry engagement, and then some lessons learned from that. Next. Again, our mission and goal was to make sure the demand for skilled nuclear technicians is met in a standardized and systematic way. In order for us to even meet that, and like most of the NSF centers, we needed to know what industry needed. So we went out there and asked what was necessary and what was needed in order to meet that mission. And that's where all these goals came from. I think like we were the experts up front and decided to do this. We beat the bushes and tried to find out what was necessary and needed in order to make the center. And that's one thing that, as far as industry engagement you do is make sure that you know what industry needs. Don't go and say you're the expert up front when you may not be, because what you may think industry needs may not be what they need. So again, provide standardized nuclear curriculum packages. Industry needed that. We didn't want to just build it and hope they came, like the movie was, build it and they'll come. We wanted to know what they wanted before we built it. I'm sorry, Ann, next slide. And next slide, I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. And that was the part of the expansion I mentioned early on, was really based on what industry was telling us. Some of the last conferences that we went to was about things missing, and for one of those was ownership was missing from students, and that was loud and clear from all of our last few meetings from a lot of the veteran employees out there, was that the students coming out didn't have ownership and they didn't have the spunk that you need to be successful and really own your field. So we're in the process of now collecting a lot of that ownership material and then try to embed it in the classroom so that these students that are coming out really understand and own their field. I know we're in the nuclear field, but again, that's something we can all do across here. Like Ann mentioned earlier, this isn't about nuclear. This is about finding out what your industry is. Our industry just happens to be nuclear. And then by doing that expansion process, we're also given more job opportunities for the students coming out of there. So you're with the combined fields, you see that there's over 60,000 possibilities of jobs by 2030. Next slide, please. And from the products, you can see, again, I know I'm giving a background of RCNet, but this is a process of showing that everything we've done is based on what we found from industry. Standardized curriculum, and you can go to the next slide, and this is just a quick point. I don't want to get hung up here. Marketing outreach, job banks, again, developing those reservoirs for industry folks to be able to come out and find workers and find employees that can fill those job pipelines. And then, of course, given the academic and career flowcharts that we developed working with the industries. You know, again, we didn't come up and say, this is what we want you to go through and this is what we think you'll make you successful. This is what we've gone out and asked, hey, what will make someone successful in your career? And then we come back and help develop it and then distribute that and disseminate that out to the students. Next.
Jamie, can I ask you a question here real quick?
Sure, please.
On the job bank, how is that working for you? Are the students going to that job bank readily, and are the employers using the job bank readily?
We do get feedback. I know more so from the students sometimes as to what it is, because we're finding, and that's one of our areas we do webinars similar to this on soft skills, because we find that the technicians are coming through and they're learning great material and they're coming out well educated in their field, but we might forget how to sell that. Again, it's all about selling yourself and letting the industry know what you want. So we do get feedback from partners. Most of the partnership are from the industry side, I should say. Oh, that's a tongue twister, sorry. Is they're actually calling us, asking us. I know Kevin gets calls weekly and daily pretty much during times of graduations about what's the student looks like. Hey, I'm in this location. Do you have some suggestions? Do you have anybody that stands out? And I know just through that word of mouth, he placed, I think, about 40 of the graduates over the last 2 years, and secondary, I want to say even secondary, tertiary partners, which I was going to talk about a little bit later. So they see it, but then they call and talk with us directly on it. Now, the students, they enjoy it, and I think they feel comfortable with it because it's getting their name out there. And then when you piggyback that with the webinar or the talks that we have on the soft skills, the interview, the resume, and that such, they really tie well together.
Jamie, that matches our experience as well. The businesses really do appreciate having the recommendation from the people that have worked with the students. They may start with the job bank, but they do really appreciate the recommendations. So that's interesting. That's why I ask you. Thanks. I'll move on.
And from the industry compass point, it's very valuable to us. We appreciate having that access to that tool.
When I was getting ready for looking for a job or graduating college, that was one of the first things I did. I just didn't send my resume. I wanted to meet somebody, because I think one of the things I'll speak about is FaceTime. Everybody needs some FaceTime. On the partners list here, just a quick synopsis here. We work with over 90 industry partners, so we feel like can you be an expert in anything? I think we're pretty close to it with that number in our particular field. And then we've also got 60 colleges and universities that we work with to help fill that pipeline. Next chart. And some of the statistics here, just in general, is that you can see is when we started the grant in 2010, 2011, how the programs have grown through the years. And one thing I like about this chart is, through the help with the Nuclear Energy Institute, what we looked at is no longer, if you see in 2010 there, very small breakouts in it, but as we've gone through, we want to know too who's looking for people to hire. So we've actually broke it out into not just nuclear fields, but we try to disseminate that out a little bit more so we can fine-tune who's looking for students and where do we need to go and try to make those contacts, because this chart's great on showing how many graduate and get jobs, but when it looks from our side of it, it helps us to find industry and possibility of partnerships to go out, and especially on the ones that maybe don't hire as many, maybe we can work with them and build that partnership a little bit more, secondary or tertiary type partnerships to help grow those graduates, so that number of unemployed or couldn't find a job gets smaller and smaller. Next slide. And again, this was a graduate breakout. I was just talking about it. Kind of takes away the ones enrolled and just shows you physically the ones that graduate and how we place them. And you can see, and sometimes the gray and black are how the growth has gone and separated out there. And then on the next slide, Ann, we're talking about partnerships early on. And with anything, you have to grow. And through the years here, you can see 5 years of data there that we went from knowing a few people to knowing a lot of people. And this is what has really helped. You mentioned the graduation and placement numbers early on. This is what has really led to that, is being able to build that. We're excited to have 90 industry partners as well as our community college partnerships out there. And we hope to grow even bigger than that. And so, but in order to get more community college, obviously we need more industry, because we don't want to just get kids in classes. We're here to get them jobs. And next slide. And then the truth. There's only one question, as it says here, that industry is really interested in, and it's very important here. It has to be on our industry relevant education. So industry wants to know what's in it for them. They're not wanting to hire somebody and train them for the most part. They want to know, am I getting a quality candidate that's knowledgeable, can learn and can do the job that we need to. They're here to make money for the most part. Very few people get out of college and don't want to make money, so anyone graduate obviously wants to be paid for the work that they do. But industry don't want to just pay anybody. They want to make sure that they're getting somebody of quality and that they are relevant to what the type of work that they're doing. Next slide. So our approach has been to articulate direct and indirect cost return on investment to industries. I'll analyze the opportunities that are out there from the workforce needs of numbers, sectors, and locations, kind of back to what I was talking about earlier with the breakdown of graduate placement. Then we do a funnel chart of opportunities, basically how we find our partners, industry partners, and then face-to-face marketing, which I was kind of talked about earlier with the graduating. You want to be able to put a face to somebody and be able to see somebody, and it's the same industry. They want to know who they're talking to. They want to be able to put a face to it. When I was in my industry side, I worked for a large corporation, but anybody that came to where I worked, I was the company. They didn't care about the CEO. They didn't care about all that. They cared about having somebody to be able to talk to that would be able to listen to what they needed and be able to work with them to get what they needed. And that's what we are, you know, how we develop those relationships. We want to make sure we are available to anybody, and we are the face, and we're not just going to send an email or any of that. We're out there. We're talking to you, which has led to us going to a lot of, let's say, non-conventional sort of conventions maybe to get some industry partners. We have found that, you know, our technicians aren't just going, the nuclear energy can't hire all of them, so we want to find them places. So we've gone outside of the nuclear convention sometimes to help try to get them graduates placed. You have to develop a belief system and with your industry too. They got to be able to believe you and not think you're just full of hot air. You know, if you're going to tell your partners you're going to do something, then you need to be able to really show them that you can do it, and that's part of it, the whole introduction. You have to investigate the new avenues, as I was talking about. You also have to be able to reinvent yourself. You have to be very flexible. Industry's flexible. They change every day. So from an educational standpoint, we can't just sit back and say, well, we've done it this way forever. We're going to continue this way. From a center or a project, anybody working in the industry has to be flexible and be able to know what they want, because a company can change directions tomorrow, and in light of that, we've got to be able to change our educational process to be able to meet that demand. And then again, make sure you're making contact with them, doing follow-ups. You don't want to just sign them up, they graduate, and they hire it out of the first class, and you expect it next year, but you don't go back and say, oh yeah, don't forget about us, we got another class coming up. You really want to go back out there and make sure you're keeping your contacts. I think Jim could probably attest to that. I know he and Kevin have worked very closely over the years and have stayed in constant contact throughout needs, and Jim knows that he's been able to call Kevin and ask for some help, and Kevin has made sure he's gone out of his way to do that, as well as RCNet.
And it presents the opportunity to sort of ramp up and ramp down based on needs. That's why the relationships are so important. You know, looking at the relationship in particular that we have with the school, based on supply and demand, we're able to make quick check and adjust. And the nice thing about working with RCNet, they're able to fill in some of the blanks, having the vast amount of curriculum and banks for us to access and all of that stuff. And I'll talk a bit more about all that when the torch is passed my direction.
Next slide, please, Ann. Discussing the direct and indirect cost, business really wants to know what's in it for them, and when it comes to dollars and cents, this has always been a great tool for me. Is a new hire is always more expensive than being able to retain somebody. Even in my former jobs, every new employee, just the training alone, was a couple $1,000s. So if you had a high 100% turnover, well, you're basically throwing money down the drain because you're constantly just redoing everything. So the idea is to be able to turn out a great graduate that's be able to retain and continually grow with the company, not just somebody that's a fly by the night. And then also you always have the indirect cost. Those are excuse me, grants, press releases, anything that shines a positive light but doesn't have direct contact, obviously, is very important, you know, to be partners with people and to show by being a part of a group, you get the free press out of that. Also, RCNS has been able to maybe have ancillary grants that the industry partners are not aware of, or a cash flow assistance that may be there that can help correspond with some of their needs and budgets. Next slide. As this goes, talking about the analyzing, going back to the number 2 on that slide, you want to analyze your job openings and opportunities. Well, you need to know what's going to happen. Working with industry helps you with that. You know if somebody's getting ready to ramp up, if there's a new plant opening, maybe there's going to be a shutdown and we need to help try to relocate our assets. So in order to really be able to do this, and like Jim was saying earlier, be able to ramp up or ramp down, if you're not a partner with your industry, you're going to miss the boat. You may have 100 graduates come out and they only need 5, or you may have 5 coming out and they need 100. But because you weren't involved, you weren't doing the FaceTime, or you weren't out there talking with your partner, you missed the boat on it, and they may be looking somewhere else. One of the conferences I just came back from, that was the case, that they felt their partner or college was not really listening to what they needed, and they were struggling to get students into the door. So again, it goes back to that particular partner was a rotating door of employees. So, you know, again, it's having a consistent person and a consistent site with your partners. Next slide. I think I answered the questions that's about to pop up there, the where and the whens, and that goes back to, again, knowing your partner and having that constant contact with them. And just to reiterate, you have to have programs that are flexible and be able to communicate that with your partners. I know here at Indian River, we work closely with FPL to make sure the classroom sizes are able to meet their demands, and we have meetings in order to anticipate that need, and not just to fluff it or anything like that. We really want to make sure we're meeting their needs, or they're our partner, so we want to make sure of that, and a quick response to that change. Next slide. Talking about the funnel chart. It's a basic concept. You're out there, you're getting your cold calls at your industry leads. You're out there really talking to everybody, trying to find out, maybe analyzing your graduate placements, trying to find out who and where they're going. Then you go through that list and you say, well, out of that, based on our needs and our businesses, these are our potential prospects out of that, because you're not going to get all 300. Love to have that many, but whatever pool you go through, you're not going to get everybody. Conflict of interest, whatever it may be, it's just not going to work. But you can narrow that down, get to your prospects, and then you hope to get a great number of those prospects as your partnerships. And in our case, we went from, just for instance, a 300, 150, and 94, as you can see, that are our industry partners. So for us, we've got about a third of those original industry leads. We were hoping for half. We're still working on that number and still actually now growing those industry leads to try to venture out. So again, it's not just being static. It goes back to the other one, being able to reinvent yourself and change. And that's, for us, that's what it's been. But it also goes back to that FaceTime contact. Next slide. And here's where the rubber meets the road, as they say. It's all about face-to-face. If you're not out there talking to somebody, constantly trying to make point of contacts, develop the relationships, because if you don't have that relationship, you're cold calling and you're going to say, well, I can help you in this way. Well, what you may be able to help them in isn't what they needed, because you never were able to have that time to sit down and discuss, have a conversation about what's their needs, ask them the questions. Like with anything, you go into it asking questions. What do you need out of this? What are you looking for? What do you anticipate your needs to be? And then come be able to answer you and know your own self well enough to say, all right, well, out of that, I can do this, we can do this, and we can do this. So I just think this is a great slide, because it's pretty self-explanatory in that sense. You can't forget about them, and that's what you're really wanting to do. Kind of back when I was the face of the company, they wanted to know that we didn't forget about them. I had some repeat customers that I had known for 7, 8 years, and that was the one thing they knew when I came there, or when they came there, they knew they were going to be able to have a contact with me, and we were going to be able to make it happen for them. They trusted me, and that's all about the face-to-face. You build that trust. Next slide. And then, like I said, follow-up. Opportunities come and go, jobs go and come, but if you're not able to reinvent yourself and stay close to the partnerships or you forget about it, you're going to miss the boat. And so follow-up is tremendous, and it allows you to grow in areas that you may not have anticipated originally. Because I know Jim has helped RCNet with a lot of avenues that we didn't see at the potential in originally. So, next slide. And this is a quote that I read, and I've heard Kevin say it a couple of times, is you should always try and put yourself out of business. Because if your company or your competition is, meaning if you're not changing and you're not adapting, somebody's going to put you out of business. So if you don't take that mindset early on and say, rather than somebody else put me out of business, I'm going to think like they do and try to stay ahead of them, you'll lose. And your partners want to know that. They want to know that you're flexible, kind of going back to reiterate, you're flexible, you're adaptable, and you're willing to listen to them and put them in the front of the mind of everybody. Next. I think at this point I'm going to ask if there's any questions when I said, I know Ann, you stepped in earlier, if there's anything out there.
There are. I have
All
a
right.
few. I would like to know how you go about getting labor market demand from the partners. The 65,000 jobs is impressive. You have a lot of colleges involved with you. And then the horizon you're looking at is out to 2030. So how do you know how those jobs fit in over that time horizon so that people know, or that colleges know, how to basically gauge their programs and their hiring for professors, et cetera?
For us, a lot of the research, we actually don't compile it just by ourselves. We do some of that at a lot of the different conferences we go to. For instance, we run at the Conference on Nuclear Training and Education this past February with American Nuclear Society. We ran a survey with the participating 40 or so community colleges in the rooms with us to get projections and anticipations for their upcoming classes. We work with the Nuclear Energy Institute as well, because they're obviously running surveys, so we don't want to duplicate as well to see where their numbers are. And then we look at the Bureau of Labor and Statistics as well. So we have a kind of a trifold area there. And then we discuss with our partner industry side too, hey, what are your outlooks for it? So we really have 4 avenues that we're pulling from, and then once we do that, we're able to compile and kind of anticipate. You know, again, 2030 is a long way out. Could something happen? Could political change in the nuclear field come about? Sure, that could definitely change that with anything. But, you know, again, that's just based on the projections of those areas that we've been able to look into and discuss. And then with our potential expansion, of that number includes the potential of the expansion in those other areas. And we had already demarked our leads in those particular fields, and they had that, a lot of that information, so we were able to add it to what we already had.
Okay. And maybe this is for you, maybe it's for Jim. Does Florida Power and Light prefer, this is kind of a loaded question, prefer your college graduates in their advertisements?
Oh, absolutely.
In other words, okay.
Yeah, I can run with that. Absolutely, and I'll explain how our program launched when, you know, the slides flip over to me, so I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. But absolutely, we have a very close relationship with the school. And sort of the piggyback on the previous question, RCNet collaborates with the Nuclear Energy Institute and the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, and all of those entities collaborate with something called the Nuclear Uniform Curriculum Program. So we're sharing all this knowledge in terms of surveys and growth and all that. One of the drivers that caused these entities to become into being in the first place was the harsh reality that 50% of the nuclear workforce was or is eligible to retire over the next 5 years. So just to keep up with that demand, it became critical for us to start collaborating with colleges and so forth. Not just my company, but all of the fleets out there that produce nuclear power. And it's not just nuclear also. The energy sector as a whole has an aging workforce. And that's one of the advantages of working with a nuclear program like this. If it meets the exacting standards of nuclear, by default, it's going to meet other industry or other power sectors as well. Electricity is electricity, the difference being how the water is heated to generate the steam. In a nuclear power plant, it's from fission. In solar, it's from heating the water or photovoltaic. I won't go into a frolic and detour on all that, but so I'm probably drifting from your question.
Okay, let's go ahead.
And I would say the nuclear industry is one thing about us is, and I guess we're lucky in a sense, it's highly regulated. So everything is crossed 2 or 3 times. So I know a lot of other industries aren't as knowledgeable about their current workforce or the certain standards, but there's so many different oversight committees and standards within the nuclear industry. It really affords us to be able to look out beyond the horizon sometimes.
Great. Let's move on then. Let's turn it over to James. James, would you take off at this point?
Sure. Thank you very much, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. I have to give a little bit of background about myself, and I'll explain why. In a former life, I was a professor. I was a department head, and I practiced law at a university in Michigan. I followed a family migratory pattern to Florida, and I was teaching at the police academy here at Indian River State College, and a position opened up with Florida Power and Light. They were looking for an academic to work with colleges, particularly with the nuclear division, and that's where I started off. I spent the first 5 years with the company supporting nuclear training. My role has expanded now so that I do strategic workforce development with all of our divisions, working primarily with colleges and so forth. So the reason I have to give that background, because it's a cautionary note. If you want to discuss the elements of an atom with me, it's not going to be a very deep conversation, but if you want to talk about the elements of a contract, I could certainly talk about that for 3 days. So let me give you a little bit of background about my company. NextEra Energy is the parent company of Florida Power and Light. It is one of the nation's cleanest generating fleets. NextEra Energy Resources, oh, you can click the slide, I'm sorry. Sorry, I got to remember to say click. There we go. So NextEra Energy Resources is one of the world's largest generator of renewable energy from the wind and the sun, and that I spend a lot of time in the north, so to speak, because I'm down in Florida now, working with college partners that have wind technician programs also, and that's another ATE area that, you know, my finger is definitely on that pulse. Click. I have to tell one quick story because I got to get it out of my head. Back when I was a professor, one day the projector the remote for it was missing. So I had a student advance the slides, and I would say click, and she would advance the slides. I went home that night, and I was watching TV, sitting on the couch with my wife, and I wanted the channel turned, and I said click. She says, was that meant for me? Am I supposed to turn the TV channel? I said, oh, I'm sorry. So, but anyway, so what we have here, this is the map of Florida. This shows the Florida Power and Light footprint. We are the largest electrical utility in the state of Florida. Florida Power and Light is a subsidiary of NextEra Energy. Click. Our nuclear fleet is one of the largest producers of nuclear power in the United States. We have nuclear power plants in Florida, New Hampshire, Iowa, and Wisconsin. Click. So here's the challenge. Where are we going to find the next generation of technicians? You heard me mention earlier that 50%, approximately 50% of our workforce is or will be eligible to retire over the next 5 years. So it's critical that we have talent pipelines to ensure that the lights stay on, so to speak, for generations to come. Click. So where do we get our talent? Historically, there are 3 talent pipelines. The first one is the military. The military produces well-trained, hard-working individuals. The only downside to hiring out of the military is the risk of hiring jumpers, meaning if they're not local to the area, they may get a better offer somewhere else and jump. The second pipeline is the recommendation. And that's where an employee recommends their nephew or their son or what have you. The challenge there is it may be an unknown commodity needing a significant amount of training. The third talent pipeline is the college pipeline. And the college pipeline allows us to take local individuals, educate them locally, and then hire them locally, and then they stay long-term with our local company. So the trick is to connect all those dots, right? So that you have folks that are recommending friends and relatives for careers with the company. What we do is we say, well, here's a perfect way to get in. Go take the program at Indian River State College. That's the feeder into our program. That way, then, we get the benefits of the 2-year job interview. And the same with the military. It's fantastic when a military veteran goes through the college program using their GI Bill. That's a perfect candidate for us because they present with military background and the college degree in power plant technology. Click. All right, so I want to give some background of how this program came about with our company and with Indian River State College, and then later down the road how RCNet became involved. Back in 2005, our nuclear division looked out at the horizon of our nuclear workforce and saw a lot of gray hair staring back at us. We hadn't had an apprenticeship in a long time. So we put together a proposal to reconstitute our apprenticeship program. And we presented it to our chief nuclear officer. Chief nuclear officer is the president of that division. We presented he embraced the proposal, but he said, I support this on one condition. It must have a college component. So we rolled up our sleeves and we went to work on building a program that would have a college component. Well, conveniently for us, 15 miles from our St. Lucie power plant is Indian River State College. So we reached out to them with our challenge, and they eagerly accepted a collaboration. And we got together with our subject matter experts and the college academics, and we built a curriculum that would meet our needs and also then allow the college to facilitate the 2-year associate's degree. And the disciplines were in mechanical, electrical, instrumentation and controls, and radiation protection. So click. All right, so the trick is, to be successful, everyone must be engaged. It's all fine and dandy to collaborate with a college, build a wonderful program, have exemplary students graduating from the program. But unless you have alignment on the industry end, things don't happen the way they should. So to be successful, you got to make sure that the industry partners' HR is all aligned, but most importantly is line management. In a power plant, line management, let's say your maintenance department head, that sort of thing, they typically are in that role for about 5 years. Very stressful, a lot of work, a lot of hours. And I call those folks pod people. They're concerned with the plan of the day and surviving the day. They're not looking out at 5, 10-year staffing plans and all that because, frankly, they don't care too much about the staffing in 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, because they're not going to be around in that role. But it's very important to get their buy-in. So that is one of the tricks to a successful collaboration with your college partner. Make sure training, everyone from your executives down to human resources, cross, and what have you, are all aligned and are on board. Click. So by aligning the college curriculum to our training, we're able to actually advance place our candidates. What we did was effectively took what used to be a 4-year apprenticeship program and reduced it to 1 year post-college. We're able to complete a whole lot of what we would call fundamentals training and unload that to the college and have that done there. But what that allows us to do then is it gives us a 2-year job interview of the students, because we're deeply involved at the college. We have subject matter experts that are supporting labs and teaching and what have you. Then when they're hired, we're able to exempt them from fundamentals training. Every nuclear power plant in the United States has with it a training facility. It's accredited, just like college programs are accredited by North Central or SACS or what have you, depending on what area of the country you're in. In nuclear, we're accredited by INPO, the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations. It does exactly what SACS does. It reviews training programs or college programs to make sure that they're meeting expectation. This curriculum that RCNet is part of meets the expectations of INPO, so that graduates of the RCNet programs, the Nuclear Uniform Curriculum programs, receive a certificate if they meet their credentials and or the student meets the qualifications, 80% or better in the core courses and so forth. They actually get a certificate that's recognizable all over the country. So aligning the curriculum is critical to success. Click. All right, now Jamie did a good job overviewing what the Regional Center for Nuclear Education and Training is all about, what they do, and their mission. So I wanted to just give a couple examples of what we were able to do successfully working with RCNet. So let's click and go to the next slide. This is sort of a review of what Jamie already went over. But in one of the earlier slides, Jamie highlighted the repositories for curriculum and so forth. And when I look back at the successes of RCNet, this is one that really is compelling. We met at the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations in Atlanta, Georgia. So we had the college partners that are part of RCNet, and we had the industry partners. So we had this large room chock full of subject matter experts from industry, experts from academics, and we got together and we worked in teams. So if your particular expertise was instrumentation and controls, for example, you were at a table with like-minded individuals working with the college folks to actually build curriculum. And the stuff that was built was remarkable. Then it was vetted and then re-vetted and approved, as everything in the nuclear world is process-driven, and it's all systematic. So the end result was absolutely fabulous tools and curriculum that is now available to all of the RCNet partner schools. That's one example of something that really worked well, and I was pleased and enjoyed working with all the academics in Atlanta. Click. And then this is, their footprint and what have you. Jamie went over all of that. And so I just want to touch base on another activity that RCNet's currently doing that I'm very excited about. The pioneers of nuclear power are all at retirement age now, or long since left us. So there's a lot of knowledge out there that needs to be passed on to the next generation. And RCNet is working on a book that's actually capturing the lessons learned from the pioneers of nuclear power. So it's a nice cross-section of folks that are running power plants. There's CNOs, there's folks from the military that were part of the nuclear Navy in the early days, the Manhattan projects and so forth. So this is a very exciting project that RCNet's working on. And then that book will be used in the classroom. And it'll be an excellent tool to show lessons learned and things we've learned, like say from 3 Mile Island, Fukushima, and how the nuclear power industry has evolved over the years and so forth. So click. So a couple key elements to success. The quickest way to end a program is for there not to be jobs at the other end. So this is why it is so important for industry and the college partners to be in collaboration, to be in constant contact so that you can check and adjust, make sure that you're right-sizing the programs. So having industry committed to hiring the graduates is critical for success. It's also important to have engagement with the industry subject matter experts. These are the folks that live and breathe the trades, and it's good to have them supporting labs and in the classroom, and certainly we're supporting advisory committees and so forth. And it's very important that the industry partners are part of advisory groups. This is how the college learns of what the trends in the industry are. Very important to keep up with it. You know, the big transition in nuclear is going from analog to digital. Well, you know, it's very important that your academic partners are ahead of that curve and so forth. And then the mutual respect for the role that each partner plays. This is very important. You know, sometimes you get in these situations where training in the nuclear world is a square peg and then education is a round hole. And that's why my company hired me. They knew I could work in both of those worlds and understand how both of those work and what is and what isn't compatible. And then collaborating with consortiums. This is extremely important. You know, that the tribal knowledge and avoiding reinventing the wheel. This is critical. Working with the ATEs, working with RCNet, and working with IMPO, CEWD, which is Center for Energy Workforce Development, and so forth. When the consortiums work collaboratively, great things can happen. So it's a real pleasure working with RCNet. They're doing fabulous things. And to see where it's gone from conception, because you know I was part of the conception team, right? We're traveling the country, building relationships with the schools, and what have you. So to see it go from the conception to some pretty significant deliverables have been a real pleasure. Click. All right, so now we get to I can stop talking and answer questions.
Okay, we have a few for you. One is we need to know how you best want us to approach you, and we need to have you put on your hat as an industry representative, perhaps in a more general sense. And I know from my industry background, I know that the colleges and universities oftentimes came to me with their hands out wanting money or support or whatever. How can we best approach an industry representative such that they want to talk to us?
Well, that's a great question. You've got to find the champion in the company that is willing to work with you. Now, particularly in the power industry, part of HR, there are dedicated folks like me that work with college relations. So it's pretty easy to get tuned in, dialed in with folks in the energy sector. You start with HR. But another successful way is if you have a contact that works for the industry, and then work through them. You know, it's how I found out about the job that I have now, Florida Powered Light. I had a brother-in-law that was an operator at the power plant, and he said, hey, there's a position for an academic opening up, and I read the description, and it was like every bullet was me, and I said, well, this is perfect. And we get that where we'll have somebody that's on the academic side that has a great idea. They'll present it to somebody that they know that works in the power plant, and that bubbles its way up to me or to whomever now. But finding the champion is key, and you know, HR is typically a good place to start if you don't have a contact on the inside.
Okay.
And you can always ping me. And feel free, anyone out there that wants to ping me, feel free to do it. I don't know if my email's on there. James.ald, A-U-L-D, at...
Yeah, it's not the next slide. I thought it might be.
But I have a caveat. I leave the country on Saturday, and I'm going to be off radar for about 3 weeks. So there won't be any quick returns to the emails.
Okay. Well, your email is actually in the slide deck that will be provided when they get the recording. Okay, and one final question for you before we do the finish-up slides, and that is, how do we manage the program graduates that happen to emerge when there happens to be a time of less demand? What do we do with them?
You know, and that is the most important question, and it's the question that the colleges really wrestle with. And let me give you a bad example of what can happen with college partnerships. Back when I started working with the nuclear division, it was all about the nuclear renaissance, and we had these huge demands for talent. We were going to be putting up 10 new nuclear power plants in the country. We're going to need this robust pipeline. But we knew if every college out there launched a nuclear power plant, we would never have enough demand to meet that type of supply. So working with RCNet, we're able to right-size programs. Now, it's self-policing though, right? We can't force a college not to try to graduate 100 radiation protections in a year. And that we have an example of that. There was a school in a state that shall remain nameless, and the school will remain nameless, that actually pushed through in 1 year 100 radiation protection technicians. Well, you combine that with the 23 other schools that are producing radiation protection technicians, industry couldn't absorb that. So it's all about right-sizing it. And if you remain collaborative with industry and the college partner, you can check and adjust. And let me give you an example of, we did such an exemplary job with this program. We did a good job filling the shelves at our 2 nuclear power plants in Florida. But we were able to check and adjust, because just as we were filling demand in our nuclear sector, we were able then to look to our fossil side of the house, our solar, our wind, and so forth. And guess what? They're hiring robustly now. So we're able to check and adjust. But another thing that the school can do to be flexible in those lean times, instead of launching a cohort every year, you have the opportunity to just run a pure cohort. So you start and finish. So you start on 1 year, and 2 years later you graduate. Working closely and collaboratively with the industry partner, you can make wise choices. But these are transferable skills also. An instrumentation and controls technician that is qualified to go to work at a nuclear power plant can also work at, and I'll give a Florida example, at orange juice processing plant or what have you. Instrumentation and controls are controls. It's all the same technology.
For RCNet, and that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier too, this is Jamie, sorry, is having those secondary and tertiary partnerships. Like Jim was saying, you're going to have an oversupply, but to the point is you want a program at a college to be able to continue and sustain, but you want to also have the students to graduate, or to get a job, I should say. So we were able to go out and help alleviate that on a few of the colleges. We were able to make suppliers, for instance, that were supplying the nuclear industry. They were actually taking on some. So that was going back to beating the bushes, looking at those prospects and say, all right, where else can we get some of these guys hired so we can maintain the programs, sustain them, and make them viable for the future. So kind of with what Jim was saying, you really just got to be out there and be able to find a place for them and know what you have first, so that you can really sell it to a different, not your primary target.
And there's an area that I didn't touch on, but it's a critical area, and it's diversity. Working with consortium RCNet, they're able to do what we're not able to do because for lack of bandwidth, and that's promote the opportunities that exist in the energy sector. We are committed to diversity, and working with RCNet, it gets the message out far better than we can, because this is what they do. So you're only as diverse as your talent pipelines. So that's another area that's very important.
Well, Jamie and James, I thank you very, very much. I think you've given us some very good ideas and tips that apply not only to the nuclear energy area, but also across the board on how we would work with industry partners. Before we move on, let me put in some plugs for some of our webinars that are coming up. And you will get a reference to these slides for everyone that's still in attendance. We do have on August 20th an effective outreach and recruitment event. We're going to talk about special populations, and I know that we're specifically going to focus on females women. That female seems weird to me for some reason. Anyway, and veterans, and it will be shared at that particular session. And then we have 2 sessions on September 24th and then again on October 15th on using the web effectively, designing your web approach, your web strategies so that they're most effective. And then we're going to have a session on November 19th talking about how to attract programs, attract students into your programs using a bridge program, perhaps attracting students that might not normally immediately place into your program and how you would get them through. We have some examples that have been very successful. So we hope you'll join for that. And we also will still tell you about our high-tech conference. This is a National Science Foundation Center sponsored event in Portland, Oregon, beautiful Portland, Oregon, coming up July 27th through the 30th. We would invite you to come to that. Here is the website. It's www.highimpact-tech.org. And there's something very special for DOL tax grantees. That is, in fact, a special convening that is on Friday morning after that conference. It is free, and it is technical assistance specifically for tax grantees. We will have sessions there that will talk about things like open source and universal design. We'll also talk about participant tracking from start to finish all the way through employment tracking. We'll have sessions on working with businesses. We'll also have all sorts of tables set up that will be in terms of Ask Me About X, where X might be something about advanced manufacturing or perhaps something about IT. There's a lot of resources that will be available to you, and I highly encourage you to sign up. So there is the link for that as well. And here are the links that we have for the email addresses. And I think we're about out of time, but we have, I thought we had one more survey that we wanted to do. Correct?
And that will come up as people exit the webinar, come up for them automatically.
Okay, I'm sorry. I did not have the right information on that. So I would like to personally thank our presenters. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, James. I think you did a fabulous job. And thank all the attendees for coming to the webinar today. I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. And we'd like to invite you back to webinars in the future. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.